Things that have never happened before happen all the time, by Mike Adams. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. So said Stanford professor Scott Sagan in his 1993 book about nuclear safety. But if you think about the last quarter century alone, we've witnessed a dot-com bust, a Great Recession, and a pandemic. And so this wisdom also seems to apply to the economy and to investing. History itself is a study of surprising events. The problem is that history is often used by investors as a guide to the future. Mark Twain said that history does not repeat, but it often rhymes. Looking back in history can be useful when the time is taken to put those events into context. We can study what people have done wrong and those actions that they took that were right. We can use history to set goals and objectives and risk that we are willing to take. History gives us some norms by which we can project future trends. However, Martin Housel points out the fallacy of using history to project forward. And quote, "A trap many investors fall into is what I call historians as prophets fallacy, an over-reliance on past data as a signal to future conditions in a field where innovation and change are the lifeblood of progress." You can't blame investors for doing this. If you view investing as a hard science, history should be a perfect guide to the future. Geologists can look at 1 billion years of historical data and form models of how the Earth behaves. So can meteorologists and doctors. After all, kidneys operate the same way in 2021 as they did in 1021. But investing is not a hard science. It's a massive group of people making imperfect decisions with limited information about things that will have a massive impact on their well-being and which can make even smart people nervous, greedy, and paranoid. But consider this. Around 65% of all trades done in the markets are now done by computer algorithms. Bloomberg and other services write news stories specifically for computers to read. Computers analyze those stories and more, including tweets. Those bots then manipulate those huge stores of data to make trades. Short-term human traders have been described as, and I quote, "playing poker with the best poker players in the world." They're talking about computers, the best poker players in the world who play round the clock with nearly unlimited resources. There are only so many poker chips on the table. And for short-term traders, it's a zero-sum game. As the old saying goes, if you've been at the poker table for a while and you still don't know who the sucker is, it's you. That is the importance of knowing that things that have never happened before happen all the time. Events like the dot-com bust, the Great Recession, and the pandemic can be scary, even terrifying events for human investors. But these black swan events leave computer algorithms completely confused. In all the vast data available to computers, there's nothing to prepare them for the black swans. During 2020, the so-called quant programs, the computer algorithms, seemed to do poorly. Almost 3/4 of quants surveyed by Refinitiv in 2020 said their models had been hurt by COVID-19. And a small but eye-catching minority of 12% declared that their models were obsolete. But investors should not be fooled into complacency either. The COVID-19 pandemic recovery lasted just 140 days. That's the shortest recovery on record. Buy and hold strategies work just fine. For those investors who sold in late March 2020 and were late buying back into the stock market, their portfolios may still be underwater. Buy and hold worked, but it may not during the next black swan. During the 1960, 1970s inflation times, the recovery of the stock market in real terms took 32 years. The dollar from 1960 to 1980 lost 70% of its purchasing power. What that meant was that on the average, what it cost $1 to buy in 1960 cost $3 to buy in 1980. Consider that in 1960, a first-class postage stamp was 4 cents. By 1980, 15 cents. A Coke that in 1960 was 10 cents, by 1980 was 35. A dozen eggs, which were 57 cents, by 1980 were 91 cents. And a gallon of milk, which was 49 cents in 1960, cost $2.16. So how did the stock market do during that time? In 1966, the Dow hit 1,000 for the first time and would not pass 1,000 again until August of 1982, 16 years later. And when you look at the stock market, in 1966, the Dow sold off 20%. And then it rose to 1,000 again. Then it sold off 30% before rising to 1,000 again. Then the Dow sold off 40% before recovering to 1,000. And finally, it sold off 20% before surpassing 1,000 in 1982. From 1960 to 1992, inflation increased sixfold. What you could buy for $1 in 1960 required $6 to buy in 1992. The stock market took 32 years to increase that same sixfold, 32 years. In other words, a buy and hold strategy that may have worked for the pandemic in 140 days would take 32 years to work in the great inflation time. Now, no one has a crystal ball to know what the next black swan will be. Could it be a volcanic eruption like Mount Tambora, which was 40 times larger than Mount St. Helens? Could it be a huge earthquake? Could it be a terrorist attack? Could it be a meteor? Could it be another great inflation or stagflation time? There are so many possibilities, many of which cannot even be imagined. All the best that investors can do is to prepare. Whether moving toward retirement or already retired, it's best to have a significant margin of safety. Margin of safety means having enough money in reserve that you do not need to draw down principal. Even if the market crashes 40 or 50% and takes decades to recover, having enough principal that you do not need to draw it down. The time to prepare is now. Why did this not work? What in the world? Did I not start it? All right, one more time and then I quit.